This is an Aboriginal story about a dreaming way, way back in the beginning, before the beginning that never ends. There was this frog, big green and brown he was. His name was Tiddalick. Tiddalick, as in the drip, drip, drip of water, followed by a lick. The land in which he lived and loved had grown very hot. It hadn't rained for days. Tiddalick was thirsty. He just wanted a burst of rain to fill up the rivers, waterholes, billabongs and lakes for him and his mates and everyone else. But there was no change. It hadn't rained for days. Whispers of a coming drought were creeping across the hills. Tiddalick could taste it on his tongue. These were tough times, dry times. And dry land ain't no place for a frog, no billabong. Where would he drink from? Tough times for a frog, dry times. It was all right for his mates. Kookaburra, perched up looking pretty in her tree, pruning her wings. Wallaby, with his big feet bouncing through the valleys. Bandicoot kicking up dust in the root and the scrub. A dry spell, light work for Lizard. And Wombat, well, he was still mooching about like there weren't a coming drought, but this weren't no place for Tiddalick. He was strong though, resilient. He knew he had to get through this. Measures needed to be taken, so he began to think. He was thirsty, so he began to drink. He drank all the water in his local stream. Still thirsty. He drank all the water in his nearest lake. Still thirsty. He drank all the water from the great rivers. Still thirsty. He drank dry all the watering holes, drained the billabong till all the water was gone, yet he was still thirsty. Tiddalick took to plotting on a rock in Wollombi, holding all the water inside his belly, worried that if he opened his mouth it might all spill out. And with no water inside him, how would he survive the coming drought? These were worrying times for Tiddalick. Walu the Sun Woman came and did her thing, put the lights out, night night, then later brought the sun back in, blazing, making all the other animals wake up thirsty, so naturally they headed straight to the watering hole for a drink. All Tiddalick's mates were there, Kookaburra, Wallaby, Bandicoot, Lizard, Wombat, all the crew, standing in the queue laughing and joking like they normally do, like it was just another day. Until they started to notice so few of the older animals walking away, scowls on face. The crew quickly realised something had gone wrong, and when they got to the water's edge and realised, they all said, "Oi, where's all the water gone?" They all stood there, staring at the empty waterhole in disbelief. Kookaburra was the first to speak. Not being funny here, but have you lot noticed that it's not just the water that's missing here? "What are you saying?" replied Wallaby. "You know what I'm saying, Wallaby. I'm saying the water's missing, and so's that friend of ours." "Who's that then?" replied Wombat. Lizard rolled his eyes. "She's talking about Tiddalick, the frog." The crew immediately broke out into a big disagreement. "That cheating so-and-so. We need to drink too. We need to teach him a lesson." Arms were flapping, noses were twitching, feet were stamping, till they all got hot and bothered, as if they needed to get any hotter, making even more problems. Eventually they stopped arguing and just stared at the empty waterhole again in disbelief. Just then, Eel came slithering along, realising what was going on. She addressed the crew. "Excuse me, sorry to interrupt, but have you lot tried talking to Tiddalick, making him see the error of his ways?" "That's a good idea, Eel," said Kookaburra. So off the crew bopped to that rock in Wollombi, where they found Tiddalick sat plotting, holding all the water in his belly, bloated. One by one, they all stepped up and tried to persuade him to let go of the water. Wallaby went first. He'd been around. He had a bit about him. Tried to speak of logic and reason. Tiddalick was having none of it. Kookaburra was up next. She talked about a time she was afraid to leave her tree, yet she plucked up her courage, spread her wings, flew away, and she was happy. Tiddalick was having none of it. Lizard then went next. Talked about the great cycle of life and how all things were connected. Tiddalick was having none of it. Just as the crew were telling the other two not to even bother, Eel came slithering up again. "Excuse me, sorry to interrupt, but have you lot tried making him laugh? If he opens his mouth, the water might come out." "Good idea, Eel," said Wallaby. So up stepped Wombat first, with his best collection of one-liners. Tiddalick was having none of it. Bandicoot then went up next, doing his best impression of Wombat. Tiddalick was having none of it. Bandicoot, Lizard, they tried breakdancing. Wallaby tried rapping. Kookaburra tried nosediving. Still, Tiddalick was having none of it. "He's beyond redemption. He's not going to change," screamed Kookaburra. "Yeah, he's going to let us all rot while he sits on his rock," shouted Wallaby. Just as the crew were turning to walk away, they hadn't noticed that Eel had slithered up in front of Tiddalick and was now performing a dance. A very strange, slow dance. And Tiddalick's eyes had begun to notice and was slowly slipping into a trance. The crew watched on, not really knowing what was going on. As Eel began to move, her moves became more complex. But she started to get herself into knots. Not on purpose. She was trying to perform a perfect pirouette. Tiddalick's eyes were following with great interest. All of a sudden, a very low, deep gurgling sound was heard coming from Tiddalick's belly. Yet still, Eel carried on, trying to get herself out of these knots, wriggling away. A second, low gurgling sound, even deeper than before, was heard coming from Tiddalick's belly. Yet Eel kept going until she just collapsed on the floor. Tiddalick couldn't take it anymore. That's when he opened his jaw and let out the biggest roar of laughter the land had ever heard before. And at that point, all the water came gushing out, filling up the waterholes, billabongs, rivers and lakes. All the crew, Tiddalick and Eel sat about laughing until Wally the Sun Woman came and put the lights out again on a newly refreshed land. "Now, I'm thirsty. Who's going to get me a drink?"